Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 4th day of Asia Regulatory Conference. Welcome to ICH Day. It's our pleasure to have all of you with us today for the insightful discussions about ICH-related topics. Thank you for joining, and also I would like to thank you to our speakers for their participation and for sharing their expertise on these important topics. We will start today with a session exploring the benefits of joining ICH and presenting IFPMA role in ICH. Follow that, we will dive into eCTD harmonization in Asia. And finally, we will conclude with a session on good clinical practices, sharing the latest updates in E6 Revision 3 and discussing their impact on clinical trial practices and alignment with international standards. But before we start with the first session, I would like to share a few housekeeping reminders. The conference is held in English. The full agenda and speakers' profiles are available at IFPMA ARC website. To ensure high-quality audio, all participants are muted. So please use Q&A box to submit your questions and feel free to upvote the questions you would like to be addressed. Also, during the sessions, we will share several resources for your further readings, and we will ask you several questions. So we will use Zoom pool, and we really encourage you to actively participate. We are excited about your active participation and look forward to engaging with you on this 4th day of Asia Regulatory Conference. Now, let's get started. It's my pleasure to hand over the floor to our first moderator, Kum Cheng Wong from Novartis, Singapore. Casey, over to you.
Thank you, Lydia. So, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Welcome to the DIE Asia Regulatory Conference Day 4 and the session on ICH, Driving Global Harmonization to Advance Global Health. During the past 3 days of this Asia Regulatory Conference, we heard from the various session speakers from across the region about regulations, collaboration, work sharings, and reliance, and the term harmonization being mentioned throughout, and the importance of harmonization. International regulatory harmonization is increasingly important given the complex, global, and diverse nature of pharmaceutical industry operations. Different regulatory authorities often have different scientific and regulatory requirements that drug developers need to meet for product approval. These can lead to duplication of effort, increased costs and time for the drug developer to bring the product to market, and a slower patient access. To address this challenge, it is important for regulatory and industry stakeholders worldwide to harmonize regulatory requirements across regions. The International Council for Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, ICH, is unique in bringing together the regulatory authorities and pharmaceutical industry to discuss scientific and technical aspects of drug registration. Since its inception in 1990, ICH has gradually evolved to respond to the increasingly global phase of drug development. ICH mission is to achieve greater harmonization worldwide to ensure that safe, effective, and high-quality medicines are developed and registered in the most resource-efficient manner. Harmonization is achieved through the development of ICH guidelines via a process of scientific consensus, with regulatory and industry experts working side by side. Since its inception in 1990, with 6 members, ICH has grown as an organization and now includes more than 50 observers and members. In this session, we have 2 distinguished speakers from the industry, Angelica Joss from MSD representing IFPMA, and from the regulatory agency Korea MFDS, Dr. Sujin Kong, to speak about the importance and benefits of ICH membership, the industry role, specifically IFPMA role in ICH, and the involvement of the Asian experts in the IFPMA task force, and also to hear firsthand from a regulator the success story of National Regulatory Authority, illustrating the process and benefits realized being an ICH member. Before I start the session and introduce the speakers, we could have a Zoom poll, and I would like to invite the participants to participate in this pool. You can see the Zoom pool questions on your screen. I give you a moment to answer the question. What is the current status of your National Regulatory Authority in relation to ICH? During the presentation of the two speakers, we encourage you to use the Q&A box to raise questions to the speakers. If you have a question you'd like to ask has already been raised, you can like that questions in the chat box. So to present the first speaker, Angelica Juice, she's the Executive Director, Science and Regulatory Policy from MSD. She is responsible for international regulatory and clinical policy issues within MSD, Global Regulatory Affairs and Clinical Safety Department. Angelica represents MSD in the IFPMA Regulatory Science Committee and is one of IFPMA's delegates to the ICH Management Committee. She will be speaking about benefits of ICH and IFPMA role in ICH on behalf of IFPMA. I'll pass this time over to Angelica.
Thank you very much, KC, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone on the line. I'm delighted to speak to you about the role of IFPMA in ICH and also the benefits that ICH can bring to everyone in the context of harmonization. Let's get started. Let's move to the first slide. So I think it's very clear that the scope of ICH is broad and has been growing over the last years. Since its inception, it is important that that it is the only organization, to note that it's the only organization where global pharmaceutical regulatory harmonization is happening in one organization. It involves actually the regulators, it involves the industry and other stakeholders, and provides a transparent platform for all of our discussions. ICH is really a consensus-driven and science-based organization with a clear governance structure, which is based and hosted in Geneva. ICH, as Casey said, was already founded more than 30 years ago, but it has evolved over the past quite significantly. And in 2015, there was a reform which actually helped to open it up for more participation. Next slide. The global benefits of ICH guidelines and standards is really very obvious. So first of all, it's important to harmonize because to have high quality and safe medicines everywhere in the world. ICH guidelines are really setting a common global standard to make sure that quality, safety, and efficacy for medicines can be provided. It is also important for international harmonization because it can increase the efficiencies for developing new medicines and can reduce the duplications that are happening if specific national requirements have to be complied with. It is also providing a good basis for strengthening the collaboration between ICH stakeholders. Because if standards are harmonized, it is easier to actually collaborate across regulators, work together across different countries. And by doing that, it can really enhance access for patients because development may be faster, filings can occur faster, and so in the end, the new medicines can be reaching patients faster. Next slide, please. So ICH has really had a lot of achievements in the past 30 years. We now have about 77 guidelines on technical requirements that are covering the areas for quality, for safety, for efficacy, and there are also multidisciplinary guidelines covering more than one discipline. There are also some ICH standards that have been developed over the past, providing standards for electronic exchange. For example, the S3 standards or the eCTD. And there's also a standardized medical terminology that has been developed, which is called MEDRA, which has a very important role to play in the pharmacovigilance environment. The membership has really grown substantially, as I have already alluded to. And this was possible since 2015, when ICH was reformed. And now the members and observers that have joined ICH in these last years represent about 2/3 of the world's population. So it has really grown. And at this moment, we have 23 members and 38 observers participating in ICH activities. Next slide. So the benefits for becoming ICH observers, which is the first step actually to get in touch with the organization. First of all, there are no duties imposed to observers. Observers can participate in the meetings if they have officially joined as observers. They can attend the assembly meetings without voting rights, of course, and they can nominate one delegate and an alternate to participate in the assembly meetings. And following the proceedings and the discussions. Observers can also propose new topics for harmonization, or they can actually appoint experts to participate already in working groups to follow and see what is happening and how the organization is working. There are two special roles, and these are standing observers, and these are the WHO and IFPMA, which have been grandfathered in when the organization was reformed, which have some additional rights compared to other observers. And these include the ability to attend actually the management committee meetings, to appoint work group delegates, and also to appoint an ICH coordinator. And in IFPMA, we are using all our roles here. The next step would be actually then, after observing for a while, to become an ICH regulatory member. What does it mean? What are the benefits, and how can you become actually an ICH regulatory member? First of all, there's an application process. Any eligible party can apply to become a member or an observer, and the decision of this admission and the application is taken by the assembly. The requirements are that the observer has actually attended in the past for at least 3 ICH meetings during the previous 2 consecutive years. And there has also been an appointment of experts from the observer in at least 2 of the expert working groups. The further requirement is that the observer is demonstrating that they are applying already some of the ICH guidelines, the so-called Tier 1 guidances. They should have been implemented when they apply for membership. And these guidances are the Q1 guidance on stability testing, the Q7 guidance on good manufacturing practice for APIs, and the E6 guidance for good clinical practice. And by becoming a regulatory member, actually there is a commitment of the regulator to implement the guidelines over a period of time. So it is expected that all of the 77 guidances that ICH currently has will be implemented accordingly once the new regulatory member has been accepted. Next slide. Showing you now what the IFPMA is doing in ICH. First of all, IFPMA represents all the research-based national trade associations in ICH that operate within the regulatory jurisdiction of ICH regulatory members, except in the EU, Japan, and US, where the industry is represented by the FPA, JPMA, and pharma. So we represent basically all the national trade associations except these 3 regions. And IFPMA, in that sense, convenes a rather diverse but consensus-driven industry voice in shaping these guidances. And at this point, we currently have National Trade Association participants from Argentina, Brazil, Canada, China, Chinese Taipei, Egypt, Mexico, Korea, Singapore, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, which is a really big group and diverse variety of countries from all the regions, and we are very proud and happy to work with all the national trade associations. Next slide. So as I told you, as a standing observer in ICH, IFPMA is attending the meetings from the Assembly and the Management Committee. Without voting rights, we can nominate up to 2 delegates to attend there, and we can appoint experts in the working groups. And at this point, we have over 40 IFPMA experts and alternates that are actively representing IFPMA. And we also have an ICH coordinator, which is actually Lydia. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot to show you at this point where we are appointing the IFPMA delegates. And you see that we have a lot of experts that are participating in the ongoing discussions. I think almost in any guidance, we have our IFPMA expert delegate participating. Next slide. How do we work with making sure that we have this broad representation? So usually we form for each new topic, we form an IFPMA task force. One of the expert nominated by the national trade associations will become the task force lead. And that is the person that is going to participate in the ICH expert working group discussions. We are also appointing a delegate, an alternate, who can participate if the lead is not available. And all the other experts that are nominated by the National Trade Association will be supporting and helping, and will have regular meetings with the leads and alternates to ensure that we have a consensus in the IFPMA task force, and that the lead can represent the consensus to the ICH working group. Next slide. And this is just to show you where our experts come from. So at this moment, we have a big share of our experts coming from China. We also have a lot of experts from Brazil, from Singapore, and from Argentina. So this shows you our variety. Sorry, next slide. We are also supporting the national trade associations. We can help the national trade associations on request to assist in the journey for guideline implementation by providing experts. We can share lessons and good practices from collaborating with national trade associations of other member countries. We are representing their members in the ICH Management Committee, and we can ensure that the local trade association interests are reflected in the IFPMA position that we bring forward there. And of course, and this is very important, national trade associations can nominate experts to develop the guidances. So by working with us and through our engagement, we will have a broad representation of experts from the countries that I just highlighted. Next slide. If you want to learn more about our engagement in ICH, we have a nice publication here, and that will also be shared with you in the chat. So you can read what IFPMA is doing and how we are engaging with ICH. And I think with that, I will hand it back to Casey.
Thank you, Angelica, for the insightful of IFPMA activities within ICH. A lot of work we are doing there, very busy. So I would like to move on to the next speaker. I would like to introduce Dr. Sujin Kong. She's a senior expert in international regulatory affairs from Korea MFDS. She'll be talking about the Korea's journey on ICH, advancing global harmonization. I'll pass this time over to Dr. Sujin Kong.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Sujin Kong, the MFDS representative to ICH. Before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to IFPMA for providing this opportunity to share Korea's experience in joining ICH and our continued effort toward the global regulatory harmonization. Next slide, please. As you know, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety serves as Korea's regulatory authority. Allow me to briefly introduce our organization. Established in 1998 as the Korean FDA under the Ministry of Health and Welfare, MFDS was elevated to its current status as a ministry in 2013. This transition was driven by the growing complexity and significance of food and drug safety in an increasingly dynamic society. MFDS functions as a central headquarters, including the Pharmaceutical Safety Bureau, which oversees policy development and safety management. In addition, we are supported by the National Institute of Food and Drug Safety, NIFDS. It's a specialized institute responsible for science-based risk assessment. Next slide, please. As shown on this slide, ICH is composed of 3 categories of members: founding members, standing members, and regulatory members. Out of 23 ICH members, MFDS is one of the 15 regulatory members. Next, please. The eligibility criteria for membership was covered in the previous presentation, so I will move to the next slide. This slide is the structure of ICH. The most important body is assembly. The assembly is an overarching body that makes important decisions, including admission of new members and adoption of ICH guidelines. And the management committee plays a crucial role in overseeing the operational aspect of ICH on behalf of all members. And this includes managing administrative and financial matters, as well as supervising the activities of working groups. Next, please. Korea's journey with ICH began in 2007, when it participated as a deputy representative of APEC, the Regional Harmonization Initiative observer. The following year, Korea attended as a regulatory observer, and starting in 2011, actively contributed to expert working group meetings, laying the groundwork for future membership. To meet ICH membership requirements, MFDS focused on incorporating ICH guidelines into Korea's pharmaceutical framework by revising laws and regulations. Through the active participation in ICH activities and contribution to EWG meetings, MFDS effectively fulfilled the membership criteria. In 2016, MFDS officially became an ICH member. And in 2018, it was elected as a management committee member. Before elaborating the MC, I want to highlight the effort MFDS made to prepare for ICH membership, including raising awareness among domestic stakeholders. ICH guidelines were translated into Korean, shared with stakeholders, and supported by targeted training programs. Next slide, please. MFDS currently serving as an elected MC member. Election to this role requires demonstrated active participation, including consistent attendance at all ICH meetings over the preceding 4 years, and the appointment of experts to at least 2 working groups. Additionally, a good record of implementing ICH guidelines is a key consideration, as the MC plays a critical role in closely overseeing the development and adoption of ICH guidelines. Next slide, please. There are more than 100 ICH guidelines and related documents, including Q&As and standards. For regulatory authorities seeking ICH membership, implementation of Tier 1 guideline, as explained in previous presentation, Tier 1 guideline is a fundamental requirement. For MC election, adequate implementation of Tier 2 guidelines, shown in the orange color, is also necessary. The remaining guidelines are categorized as Tier 3. To qualify as an elected MC member, at least 50% of the Tier 3 guidelines are expected to be implemented, along with a detailed plan and timeline for implementing the rest. Since MFDS was first elected as an MC member in 2018, it has been successfully re-elected twice in 2021 and 2024. This consistent recognition underscores MFDS's strong track record in implementing ICH guidelines. Next slide, please. The ICH guideline development process followed a structured and 5-step procedure. It begins with identifying and selecting topics, followed by drafting a concept paper. Then step 1 begins. An expert working group comprising representatives from regulatory authorities and industries is formed to develop a draft technical document. Once the draft achieved consensus among the experts, it is submitted to the ICH-MC and Assembly for endorsement in step 2. In step 3, the draft undergoes broader consultation across member region, where stakeholders provide comment. After the comments are reviewed and incorporated, the finalized guideline is adopted by the ICH Assembly in step 4, and subsequently integrated into the national regulatory framework of members through implementation. MFDS actively engaged in selected working group throughout the 5-step process. Regardless of its direct involvement, MFDS has established its own process to ensure the timely implementation of ICH guidelines. Once ICH guideline reached right before and after finalization, MFDS begins translating the guidelines and adapting it to Korea's regulatory framework. The draft then opened for public consultation to gather feedback, comment from stakeholders. Based on feedback received, MFDS finalizes and enacts them in form of guidelines or notification, and then report its implementation status to ICH. Next, please. Korea is actively contributing to the development of ICH guidelines. Currently, MFDS participate in 16 out of 33 ICH working groups. Next, please. Although Korea began implementing ICH guidelines shortly after the establishment of KFDA, its participation became more proactive after joining ICH and contributing to guideline development through the working groups. Particularly around the time of Korea's accession to ICH in 2016 and in preparation for election to MC, efforts to implement outstanding guidelines significantly increased. In 2020, mandatory guidelines have been fully implemented. Next, please. MFDS had successfully implemented 90% of ICH guidelines. Among the remaining 9 guidelines that are currently in the process of implementation, guidelines such as E14S7B Q&H, Q3C R9, Q5A R2, and Q9 R1, they are planned to be implemented by the end of this year. Next, please. Korea shares update of ICH guidelines and trend with the public and industry through its website. These include brief update on ICH activities and translation of ICH guideline and meeting minutes of ICH assemblies. Additionally, update on EWG activities, such as requests for public consultation on draft guidelines, are also posted here. Next, please. One of the key priorities for MFDS is education, offering training programs for industry, academia, and other stakeholders. To support this, MFDS has established a training cluster addressing issues such as guideline development, revision, and implementation, while also shaping agendas for ICH training program. MFDS conduct annual training sessions, typically lasting 2 to 4 days, with guidelines selected based on proposals from Korean stakeholders. Our training program received consistently positive feedback from participants. These educational initiatives and communication with the public are actively managed by our affiliated institute and IFDS. Next slide, please. In 2023, last year, Korea's pharmaceutical market grew by 5.3% compared to the previous year, reaching a record high of 31 trillion Korean won. It is the highest record since the data collection began in 1998. While Korea's import and export performance has demonstrated consistent growth with notable surge during COVID-19, a slight decline has been observed in recent years. Despite this, the domestic pharmaceutical market continues to expand, driven by the robust production performance, which reached 30 trillion Korean won in 2023. The growth in pharmaceutical export and import can be attributed to various factors, but Korea's membership in ICH and the consistent implementation of the guidelines have undoubtedly provided a strong foundation for this growth, I believe. Finally, next slide, next please. Being part of an ICH comes with both challenges and benefits. For the challenges, first, there's resource intensity. Adapting guideline requires significant time and effort for self-assessment, implementation, and continuous maintenance of guidelines. Both for regulators and industries, the learning curve can be steep as they work to understand and apply these complex guidelines. This can be more so for small and medium-sized enterprises. Next, resource constraints are a real issue. Regulatory authorities often have to manage limited resources within working under tight timelines, which can create operational challenges. Additionally, language barriers pose another hurdle. For non-English speaking countries like us, both regulators and stakeholders often struggle to interpret and apply the guideline effectively. On the positive side, ICH membership brings many advantages. First, it improves efficiency and consistency. By adopting a single harmonized guideline, we can eliminate redundancies and avoid the inefficiencies of managing multiple national standards. Second, it enables active participation in transparent, science-driven, and consensus-based processes for developing international guidelines. Another significant benefit is regulatory advancement. For instance, Korea's regulatory maturity was validated when MFDS achieved WHO's global benchmarking tool maturity level 4 in 2022, and also designated as WHO listed authority in 2023. This recognition confirms that Korea's regulatory system operates at an advanced level. ICH membership also supports proactive innovation by making it easier to reflect and incorporate new scientific and technological development. Furthermore, compliance with ICH guidelines provide better predictability and certainty for industry. Market access is another critical benefit. Compliance with ICH guideline enhances pharmaceutical trade, reducing trade barriers. Finally, Harmonized guidelines ensure the quality, safety, and efficacy of medicine, leading to better health outcomes and public health in healthcare system. In summary, while there are challenges to be an ICH member, the benefits outweigh them, helping to advance regulatory system, supporting industries, and ultimately improve global public health. Next, please. Thank you for your attention. Any question, comments are more than welcomed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sujin Kong, for the very insightful and interesting information coming out from Korea MFDS. Firstly, I want to congratulate to Korea MFDS for the advance and progress that you made in the implementing of all the ICH guidelines. More than 90%. That's very impressive. Congratulations again to Korea MFDS. So now is the time for the Q&A session. If you have any question, please do type in the chat, the Q&A chat there. Right now I do see there's a question. Let me open the Q&A chat. There's a question for Dr. Kong. For MFDS, did you need any legislations or new legislations or legislation amendments for implementing ICH guidelines during 2008 to the year 2016?
Oh yeah, of course we did need a new legislation amendment to proactively implement ICH guidelines. But if you want to the specific the legislative amendment, I do not have information right now, but I can provide you through the email if you want to.
Okay, thank you. So anyone else have questions, please do put it in the chat. I think I have one question for Angelica. So you have been involved in ICH activities for many years. How can industry members support IFPMA in the work within ICH? And what kind of advice and tips you could give us to fellow member industry?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it is very important when we have these opportunities as IFPMA to participate in guideline development. We send out a call for expert nominations to the national trade associations of our member countries. And so with this call for experts, I think it would be good if industry experts would actually raise their hands and participate in our groups. We are creating, as I told you, this IFPMA task force with experts from all over the world, the different regions, to represent our diversity. And so we actually encourage that industry experts are responding to the call for nominations and are joining our group.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we all hear you, and we all hear you. I hope the industry member will respond to your call. Okay, I'm looking at the time now. With the interest of time, we have 5 minutes left before the next meeting. I would like to wrap up this session so that we can have enough time for the next session to complete. So I want to thank both speakers, to Dr. Kong and to Angelica, for the insightful and participation in this session here. Thank you so much. So let me conclude the meeting here today and some of the key takeaways and insights. So there are 4 pillars that we sort of summarize. First one is the regulatory alignment. The adoption of ICH guidelines promotes harmonized regulatory standards, reducing inefficiencies, enhancing predictability, and ensuring that medicines meet consistent quality, safety, and efficacy requirements across markets. Secondly, is mutual benefits for regulators and industry. As pointed out by our both speakers, ICH membership strengthens regulatory system by providing clear, harmonized frameworks, reducing duplication and fostering global collaboration for both regulators and industry. This translates into streamlined process, better resource utilization, and faster patient access to medicines. Thirdly, is collaborative implementation drives success. The effective implementation of ICH guidelines depends on robust engagement between regulators and industry, ensuring shared understanding of expectations and enabling the simplest adoption of new standards within national regulatory frameworks. Importantly is to build capacity building and global health impact. ICH plays a critical role in enhancing regulatory capacity through training, knowledge sharing, and the adoption of harmonized guidelines. This strengthens regulatory systems worldwide, ensuring better health outcomes while improving access to safe and effective high-quality medicines. So with this, I will thank you for all our speakers and thank you for our audiences for attending this session. And we learned a lot more about ICH and all the activities. So I ask you to stay on. For the next session, I would like to invite Associate Professor Tan Kwai Chun from Duke NES, who will be moderating the next session on eCTD harmonization in Asia. Please stay tuned. And I'll pass this time over to Professor Tan.
Thank you, Casey. It's a very interesting session, and thank you for the previous speakers for sharing their thoughts. For our particular session, we have curated our industry expert from IFPMA, as well as regulators from the Malaysia National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agencies, NPRA, and Thailand Food and Drug Administration, the Thai FDA, to come together and have a discussion with you on the current state of eCTD in Asia, what are the success stories we have observed, and as well behind the success stories, what are the challenges and the strategies and the recommendations they have thought through. We hope through this session we can encourage more in Asia to adopt the eCTD so that we can actually have a more efficient and sustainable product life management. Let us start off first by hearing from you, our virtual attendees, as well as our panelists. What do you think, and do you have experience on ICH eCTD submission or process? Please take a look at the poll, and we really appreciate if you can give us some of your feedback. Thank you for those who have submitted the answer. We can move on over to the next presentation. Oh, the results is out. Thank you very much. So from the poll, we can see 35% of our virtual attendees have given their feedback that they have experience with ICH eCTD submission of processes. Later, after the presentation by Dr. Sunny Chong, where we have Q&A, we'll be most happy to take any questions that you have regarding your experience or regarding the processes of the implementation. Let's start this session first with a presentation by Dr. Sunny Chong. Dr. Sunny Chong is the Senior Director of the APAC Regional Lead of MSD. She'll be presenting on insights from the Asia Partnership Conference of Pharmaceutical Associations. Over to you, Dr. Chong.
Thank you, Wei Chen. I hope you hear me all right. Okay, great. So let me start my presentation. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I'm very pleased to share with you, first of all, the paper that is about to be published and is led by the Asia Partnership Conference of Pharmaceutical Associations, APAC. Here, I would like to focus on paperless e-submissions and eCTD. Now, a little background about APAC. It is a trade association across in Asia, regional ones consisting of 14 member associations, as you can see in the diagrams, including India, OPPI, Japan, JPMA, Indonesia, IPMG, etc. So these sister associations come together, and we are very pleased to mention that we have just finished the second APAC paper that is accepted for publication by AAPS Open. Now, this paper talks about our insights with regard to e-submissions and eCTD. Next slide, please. The first insight from APAC, number one, is 58% of our national regulatory agencies implement entirely paperless e-submissions. So in Asia, all 12 economies now have e-submissions. Among them, 58%, the e-submission is completely paperless. As you can see, China, CN, IN, India, etc., 58% of them completely paperless in their e-submission. Next slide. The APAC insight number 2 says that 42% of these NRAs, in terms of the structure format, they are accepting the ICH eCTD format. 8%, those in gray, Hong Kong, it has the e-submission with ICH eCTD structure, although it's not eCTD yet. India, on the other hand, is having its own country-specific structure. And 42% in orange, those are our NRAs having a dual structure, i.e. they are having both ICH and ASEAN CTD. Next slide, please. So the third APAC insight is that when regulators look at e-submissions for eCTD, almost nearly 60% of our NRAs, they don't mandate a baseline requirement for existing products to support the transition to e-submission or to eCTD. And this is very much in line with what APAC is recommending. Next slide, please. So the insight from APAC number 4 is when you look at e-submissions, you can't. There's a need to consider burdens or additional burdensome or country-specific requirements that have a huge impact in terms of the full benefits of e-submission. Now, you look at this graph here, you will see that the top burdensome requirement that we encounter is indeed the management of multiple strengths, pack sizes, size, dosage forms under multiple applications. That's 58% of APAC members deem that really highly burdensome. The second one, also quite burdensome, is really the lack of a single submission mechanism, i.e. not a single portal, but split in various pieces. For example, module 1 is submitted as paper or via portal, then module 2, module 5 in CDs or DVDs, etc. So in separate cases rather than in a single place. Equally burdensome as the second one is a complex dossier structure based on country-specific requirements, as mentioned earlier on, not in line with the ICH CTD structure, whereby companies get that all the time because it's aligned with international, but we have to reformat because it's based on country-specific requirements. The fourth one, really challenging as well, is in terms of the ask of complying to a local software, and that somewhat really challenging. Instead of a globally recognized vendor, a local software is mandated, and that poses lots of challenges. And sometimes non-English dossier, again, that's pretty challenging as well. Next slide, please. When you look at our APAC members, the priority that will be high in terms of having a discussion on eCTD with the local regulators. There are 4 of them which I quickly highlight here. So our APAC members in Korea, in India, in Singapore, and Malaysia, they prioritize eCTD discussions with our NRAs within the next 1 to 3 years, pretty high, as you can see here. Next slide, please. So with that, I quickly then can come to some recommendations here. As you can see, in terms of e-submissions, we see that not all NRA are implementing paperless e-submission. Some 42% still require paper in their system. Another observation that we see is this varying dossier formats. Instead of a single ICH-CTD dossier format, we see a variety of them. And that means reformatting, which increases workload and resources. Now, to streamline processes, APAC advocates for a fully paperless system and a single globally harmonized structure based on the ICH-CTD. And the recommendation is adopting it sooner rather than later. On the eCTD front, it is really encouraging to see that a number of our NRAs already implemented eCTD. It's indeed not ideal at times when you consider that there are country-specific requirements standing in the way. And we have shown that the most burdensome requirement is the separate application for each strength, size, dosage form, pack sizes. So we know that eCTD is for efficiency. It's for regulators to come together to work shared. So its design is as such, right, for efficiency. And so eCTD is designed to consolidate all, multiple strengths, etc., into a single application. So this leads to significant efficiencies, and this is what eCTD is intended for. And we have seen the success in the EU, in Australia. And this is where we ask for NRAs, and we recommend that, right, to look at implementing eCTD by not having country-specific requirements as such in their eCTD system. The last recommendation we have seen also that very much aligns with NRAs, most of the NRAs, is that they don't recommend a baseline when they are transitioning from paper to e-submission or to eCTD. So again, APAC supports not mandating baseline, especially for older products, right? It's minimal activity. If baseline is really needed for whatever reasons, we ask for phased approach, or we ask for a lot of flexibility, and we ask for working together with stakeholders so as to make the submission process, review, and dossier maintenance to be not having lots of challenges and be having a smooth transition in that. So with the recommendations, I'm happy to move to the conclusions of my presentation. And we see that indeed, right, the shift towards digital transformation evident in Asia, especially when you see that 100% adoption of e-submission, although not all e-submission is based on purely paperless and is not based on the use of ICH-CTD dossier format. And this is where we see room for further convergence to international standards. So with that, we recommend, number one, an entirely paperless e-submission eCTD system with a use of a single portal, and not so that it's everything is in a single place. Number two is using the structure, a single CTD dossier structure based on ICH. And number three is a pragmatic phase approach, especially when looking at retrospective update of existing products. We ask that this will not be a mandatory requirement of baseline update in terms of existing products. So APAC truly supports and value partnership with our NRAs in implementing eCTD. We want to enable full benefits of eCTD digital efficiency and standardization that facilitates work sharing, reliance across multiple regulators, and thereby, with this, expedite the launch of innovative medicines for people in Asia. And this is our recommendation, our insights. We would truly ask that we can continue to collaborate and partner with our NRAs in this. And finally, my last slide is to acknowledge colleagues, APAC members who really play a big role in enabling us to finish writing this paper, providing you the insights, and I hope you find them helpful. And especially here, we want to acknowledge our last paragraph, that invaluable inputs from our SPR colleague and SPR eCTD SMEs, Andrew Given, Team Power, Anna Sokolovic. Thank you all so much for your input and kind assistance in helping us in completing this paper. And thank you all for listening to my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chong. A very impressive paper covering across a diverse regulatory system with different maturity levels and different stakeholders. I think you brought across a very important point on the importance of digitalization and how it can support regulatory efficiency, harmonization, and pragmatism, ultimately benefiting the patient and facilitating access. So now we'll move on to the next segment, which we also would like to hear first from the Zoom participants. Hearing from your survey, we would also like to hear from the virtual participants 2 poll questions. May I have the poll question, please? So the 2 questions which you also want to know, and these 2 questions will help to facilitate the panel session, would be: what do you consider the key obstacles to implement the ICH eCTD in your country? And the second would be, what are the challenges you face with e-submissions due to local requirements? So I see we have our answer. The 48% actually highlight the key obstacles to implementing ICH eCTD as in country-specific requirements. For example, one site, one license rule, or the specific request of a local software. The second one is budget constraint, followed by competing priorities. And then also looking at the first experience of ICH eCTD4 from reference agency. And this is also an important point, even though the percentage is 5%, because it brings about the key point of reliance and information sharing between regulatory agencies. Limited technical expertise has also been voted as one of the key priority area. In terms of challenges, there has been a discussion or highlighting of the 5% of lack of uniform submission platform. And managing multiple strengths and pack size, Using different separate applications is also a challenge that 33% of you have told us about. Mandatory use of country-specific submission software has been flagged up again, and preparing non-English dossier is also a challenge. With this feedback from the virtual participants, I will now open up a panel discussion. I would also like to invite this point our two invited speakers. Let me introduce them first. Ms. Nik Samsia Nik Saleh is our Senior Principal Assistant Director at the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency in Malaysia. She has over 22 years experience at the MPRA with different variety of positions and diverse responsibility within the organization. Mr. Krisada Limpanon is our Senior Advisor of the Pharmaceutical Information Technology and Data Sciences Unit in Thailand's Food and Drug Administration. Mr. Krisada has also over 20 years of regulatory experience. We are very honored to have both of them join us today to have this discussion on eCTD. Let us start off first with a discussion from the Thai FDA, Mr. Limpanon. Could you tell us more in terms of the decision making and the thought process and the benefits as well in terms of actually implementing a single eCTD format? Over to you, Mr. Krisada.
Thank you very much. I would like to share our experience. In Thailand, we was accept the eCTD in the year 2017. In that year, our director and our secretariat is we have a strongly policy to move to the electronic submission, and we are study a lot what the platform that we use to submission, and we work closely together with our private company. We have a association from the manufacturer, we have association from the importer, and we are the working group. We are working the working group to together to discuss what the platform. So we are select the eCTD is a solution for the dossier structure that we submit in the electronic platform. So we change our regulation for the new products. For example, new chemical entity, new biological entity, and the vaccine for the human use. We change our regulation to use the eCTD, and we have the single platform of the eCTD system. But we use in that year, the 2017, we use the eCTD version 3.2. And for the benefit about second question, the advantage of when we use the eCTD, when we can communicate with the company and our expert when we review the dossier, and it will easy for the manufacturer or importer that they move the dossier from the stringent authority or from the America, US FDA or from the European country. They are quickly. They do not need to reshuffling the dossier again. So the advantage, the first is for the applicant, they can use the same dossier from module 2 to module 5 and submit to Thai FDA. They only change in the module 1 only. In that, now we have a module 1 Thailand specific. Now it's the version 1. The second advantage is we can because of our recommendation, if they use the same dossier, for example, for the they have a different package size or different strength, but most of them are that most of them is the same document. They can use the one identification number, and they put the different strength and different location in the same dossier. It's easy to review, and it will be good for the amendment after the registration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your sharing of your experiences. We would also like to hear from Malaysia MPRA. We understand that you are considering and planning your eCTD implementation. Maybe you could share with us some of your considerations and strategies in the eCTD implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Wei Chuan. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Well, first I would like to share on e-submission. For MPRA, we've started the e-submission way back in 2002, and the system is known as Quest, which has undergone a series of upgrades. And our currently active system is known as Quest 3 Plus, which was designed in according to the ASEAN Common Technical Dossier, known as eCTD. However, MPRA also accepts the ICH CTD format for registration submission to minimize duplication of effort for the applicants. Just for your information that, like you mentioned earlier, yeah, we are considering implementing eCTD, but currently our focus is on coming up with a newer version of Quest, which is known as Quest 5, with a target completion date in 2026. This system, the flow, the specification has been finalized, and this time, as compared to the current system, we developed in accordance to the ICH CTD format, and we are allowing the multiple manufacturers to submit the product submission in one single application. However, this new system development, we do not consider including the integration with eCTD yet. Anyhow, considering the global shift toward a single dossier submission, of course, to improve the efficiency of market approval, and of course, for faster market access, MPRA is now acknowledging the importance of implementing this eCTD. However, further engagement is still needed with relevant stakeholders to discuss on way forward, particularly to determine the most suitable platform for ensuring smooth integration with our domestic system.
Thank you for sharing, Ms. Nick. Now over back to Mr. Quesada. You share with us the success stories and you make it look so easy, but I'm sure there's a lot of challenges behind it. Can you share with us some of the challenges that you face and how it was being overcome?
Thank you. When we started ETD, we faced to the challenge. The thing when we because of someone talk about the cost of the software. So the challenge, the trick for the another authority, we need the strongly policy from the top management of the authority to use the electronic. But in Thailand, we are lucky because of the minister of Thailand, and they have the policy to change everything into e-submission. So when the strong policy, we have a power to talk with our industry. And because trick number 2 is you should work together with the company. Because of eCTD is a cost from 2 sides. The cost from the Thai FDA, we have some cost to maintain the system, to provide the program for our regulator, for our expert to review in the eCTD platform too. We need some software to manage them. So we should have the budget to maintain and upgrade. And for the company, because of the company, they have a budget to buy a software to publish eCTD in the company side. So we try to negotiate the software. We negotiate for the some 3 or 4 license that are provided by Thai FDA for the company to prepare the dossier when they would like to submit to Thai FDA. But if the company they have enough the budget to use by themselves, it's okay. But for the small company that they don't have the budget, Thai FDA was subsidized partial by use the software in Thai FDA, and we try to develop the local software to prepare the eCTD for submission to Thai FDA. We have the code name the NVIDA. We have the partner with the National Vaccine of Thailand. So we develop to the small program, and I call basically the program to prepare, submit, and prepare the XML something like that, and submit the simple eCTD to Thai FDA platform to review the constraint of the budget of the company. But and the last trick we should be to review the eCTD platform now, because of the ICH are planning to change the eCTD to version 4.0. But we need to prepare the budget and to prepare the knowledge training our company to how we change to the version 4, if necessary or not, or how about the budget, how about the knowledge of the company, something like that. For challenge in the Thai FDA now, this challenge we need to be changed to eCTD version 2, version 4 or not, and how we to go that. And the next challenge that we face now, the HL7 fire. HL7 fire will be discussed internal meeting in Thai FDA too. So the trick challenge, the last one, the NIA should prepare the staff for internal to know about the electronic in the NIA side, and the pharmacist in the domain expert of the eCTD, because of only the computer engineer or computer software, they don't know about the eCTD. So if you prepare the small unit in your organization that they are the technician in the pharmaceutical, something like that, they can, and when they learn about the eCTD spec from the ICH, it will better and to improve quickly and with benefit for your authority too.
Thank you very much for your sharing. I hope that answers some of your question, Nick. In summary, I think Mr. Krisada is sharing that collaboration is very important, not just among the regulatory ecosystem with the industry, but also with the IT, the finance, the budgeting, and all other aspects in terms of execution. At this point, maybe I'll ask Dr. Chung as well to share your perspective with the varying degrees of implementation of eCTD. Here, we're only having a very small subset of regulators in this platform, given the short time. But from your paper and from your perspective, what's your recommendation for the top 3 best practices that you think could help to facilitate the eCTD implementation? Over to you, Dr. Chung.
Thank you, Wei Chen. We talk at length, right, to talk about paperless, and to talk about a single format based on ICH-CTD and not mandatory baseline when going into eCTD. And as we are working together, and we too want to recognize that for a recommendation to start with a roadmap, when NRA is considering eCTD transitioning into eCTD. So with the roadmap, it helps in terms of having early conversations with all stakeholders, say 18 months in advance, so that all stakeholders can come together to discuss, to look at ways that can be implemented efficiently and based on the local context, right? And also it clarifies requirements, and this transparent communication and support will help ensure that it will be a very successful eCTD implementation. And also looking finally at a globally recognized vendor, so as to have a system that is able to talk to all the other ICH major countries and international regulators who are using the same standards, which facilitates eventually work sharing, joint assessment, and ultimately benefits the overall efficiency of the system.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chong. I'm aware the questions are coming in quite fast and furious. Before I open up the sessions for the audience Q&A, maybe I'd like to ask the speakers here, are there any other points you want to raise in terms of the benefits and the challenges that you face for eCTD that you want to share with the rest of the regulators and the industries at this point?
Well, maybe I can add on to our local challenges, because thank you, Prisada, for sharing a very useful tips. I mean, as for us, to move forward with the eCTD implementation. But in terms of Malaysia context, firstly, I would like to share that this current system is actually not only used for pharmaceutical product registration, but also for other product categories such as traditional product and for cosmetic notification, which of course requires different requirements. So our government policy is to have the integrated system development by implementing the whole of government concept, which aims to have a single end-to-end system. So you see, by having these multiple types of product in one system, we can anticipate the complexity, security, and also privacy issues that may arise in the process of integrating both the domestic and eCTD software in the future. So I guess, of course, we will learn from Thailand, from Singapore. We need your guidance also. We can learn more from you, especially to better understand the system and address concern from various aspects. And also would like to highlight the concern from various sectors. You see, for innovators, I think the system they are familiar with the system already. But for smaller, medium entrepreneurs or smaller pharmaceutical industry, they have their own kind of challenges, or especially when it comes to potential additional costs in implementing this eCTD for market approval and also for post-market activities.
Thank you for bringing up a very important point of early conversations, not just with the big pharma multinationals, but also the smaller companies as well, so that everyone is on the same table. On that note, let us look at some of the questions that's been coming in. Maybe I could lump some of the questions together based on the interest of it. I think maybe let's start with MPRA. The question, may I read out loud, is MPRA able to share any eCTD implementation timelines or targets on the timelines of stakeholder engagement at this point? And also, the second question has been addressed somewhat, but you could add on in terms of challenges seen for implementing eCTD for MPRA.
The first question is on the timeline and target. As I shared earlier, we are developing Quest 5, the newer version, which is to be completed in 2026. But even though this is our target for the current system, which initially does not include the integration with the eCTD, what we are planning moving forward is actually to have a stakeholder engagement again with all relevant parties so that we can discuss further on this. At this point of time, we don't really have a specific timeline and target, but moving forward, we will schedule stakeholders engagement first.
Thank you very much. That's been very helpful. The other question I think would somewhat be addressed to Dr. Sani and Ms. Nick as well. But Mr. Christadon, please jump in as if you want to contribute in terms of your thoughts on this. Maybe Dr. Sani, you can answer this first. In terms specifically addressing on your conclusion slide, there is a question that asks in terms of understanding your recommendation on a single CTD dossier structure based on ICT, but bearing in mind that Southeast Asia region has adopted eCTD since the start of 2009. Over to you, Dr. Chong.
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you, Wenzel, for the question. So when we talk about eCTD, electronic CTD, eCTD is based on ICH CTD structure, and this is why adoption of the ICH CTD structure is really the start. You need this backbone, and with that, it goes into the eCTD. Because eCTD is based on ICH CTD structure. So perhaps maybe at this juncture we could invite our Thai FDA colleagues. So Thai FDA when they started eCTD, indeed the eCTD is based on ICH CTD. Perhaps we could invite you to elaborate more.
Mr. Chrisadon, would you like to comment?
Yes, in the Thailand, when the ACTD, these are the agreement in the ASEAN country to accept the dossier in the paper-based system. So, but different in the electronic submission. In our way, we state in our regulation, when you use to electronic submission, the structure will submit in the eCTD format. So if you would like to accept only the ASEAN CTD, when we discuss, because in that year we discuss only in the paper base, they are table of content, something like that, the table of content, and submit and prepare the dossier in the file and print it and submit to the authority. So in Thai, but our regulation, when they would like to use the electronic submission, the structure in the electronic submission, we use the eCTD format in the ICH format. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for sharing your experience. There's one question from Ms. Nick. In terms of MPRA, would you consider to implement eCTD with the ASEAN CTD format for the Quest 3+ system at this point? And is there any alignment in the future to map across both CTDs format?
I think I've answered our current status of the designing a new system instead of changing on the existing system. We are focusing on the newer version instead of to perform any changes to the existing system. But in terms of submission, the format, like Sani has presented earlier, Malaysia will accept a dual format. So you can submit either eCTD format or ICH CTD format just by putting in, if you're using, let's say, for example, if you already prepared the ICH CTD format dossier, you just attach that format into the relevant section in the Quest 3+ system. And also on the second question, on the alignment of the ASEAN CTD to the eCTD or ICH CTD, I think I'm not in the capacity of the ASEAN to answer this question. I'm not sure whether this issue has been discussed before, but I think it is a good, it is good to discuss this if it has not yet been discussed at the ASEAN regional meeting level.
Thank you for your answer. I hope that answers the query. And if there's further question, I'm sure there's an ongoing discussion on this. And to end the Q&A, there's one last question. So this I'll direct it to Dr. Chong. Do you think that eCTD would increase the regulatory compliance cost of the drug industry?
I think no pain, no gain, right? Cost is definitely a consideration, but think about investment worthwhile. And this is why we are emphasizing so much in this session, because it's not easy, straight. There's a lot of consideration in terms of cost, and so much has been invested. And this is why we want to see that the investment is indeed giving you the efficiency that you want, because the investment you're putting here is, number one, digital, right? In this era, fit for purpose. So if that's the case, it should bring you the investment return of efficiency and sustainability, right? So with that, we are so passionate here, APAC, about implementing eCTD the way that internationally everybody is doing it. And that's why we are passionate about doing it paperless, doing it based on ICTD, do not mandate baseline, have a single portal for submission, condensing every single strength, whatever, into, having a multiple strengths into one single application. So with all this, you will reap the benefits of efficiency and sustainability for many, 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 many years to come, not just for your NDA, but for your life cycle management. And at the end of the day, to enable you to work share, to joint assessment with multiple regulators, which is really the smart and modern way to go as we talk about reliance. So think about this, then cost is worthwhile, but cost is more worthwhile you implement eCTD the right way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chong. On this note, I think the conversations can be ongoing for a while. And usually we end the session with more questions than answer. I think there's one last question, which I think given the short time, we may not be able to answer. But if anybody would like to take on this question, is one world, one dossier. In principle, would we say we all would agree to that eventually? Are we all supportive? Thumbs up. Okay, so we will get there. So maybe now I'll move on to have the key takeaways and insights of what we have discussed so far. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I think the key takeaway for myself and for many of us here is paperless submission and sustainability, both for the climate as well as for our own efficiency and product cycle management. We talk about harmonizing dossier formats. The ultimate aim would be one world, one dossier. But why? The why of doing this is really to streamline submissions, to reduce reformatting and inefficiency, and a smoother transition to meet the patient's needs. And we also talk about simplifying, consolidating submissions. The objective of eCTD is really to simplify submissions. So if the companies or regulators are able to accept multiple strength, pack size on dosage forms, that would actually bring out the best of what eCTD is meant to implement. And collaboration. We have heard multiple times throughout this session that early conversation and pragmatic approach through the transition of eCTD is key. Not mandating baseline submissions would ease the challenge for all stakeholders. And collaborations not just within the regulatory ecosystem, but as we heard from Mr. Crisadon, also with even research institutions and government bodies like National Vaccine Institute would actually allow you to show and implement the full benefits of eCTD so that we can actually facilitate work sharing and reliance across multiple regulators and facilitate the access to the patients in a timely manner. On this note, I would like to end the session of this panel. Thank you very much for your contribution. We really appreciate the questions being asked and allowing an interactive discussion and session. And now we will announce for a virtual coffee and tea break. I'm really looking forward to the next session on GCP, where we'll discuss about ICH E6R3 guidelines. Thank you everyone for your attention.
So welcome everyone back from the break. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome our audience and our speakers to today's session for the ICH E6R3 Advancing Clinical Trials, the impact of E6R3 guideline. So we all know the E6R3 guideline is actually the tier 1 guideline in the ICH families. So I really look forward to today's session. So I'm Sally. I'm currently working in AstraZeneca Global Research and Development and heading up the quality assurance of Asia-Pac team. I'm in the past 5 years, I have been working also in the ICH E6R3 Global Experts Working Group as IFPMA lead. So I think today it's really we are privileged, also to invite and can hear from the leading expert who will share their insights on the update of E6R3, including the progress, including the kind of implementation considerations, and also one of the other hot topic for Annex 2 is real-world data and evidence. So we're also going to hear the associated challenges and opportunities. So later on, we will start with an overview of E6R3 and then followed with a panel discussion. We will also try to save some time for the audience to ask for questions in the end. So please, write down your questions in the chat. Really look forward to a very productive and engaging session. So first of all, let's warmly welcome our first speaker from PMDA Japan, Ms. Eriko Yamazaki-san, to share with us an overview of ICH E6R3 guideline revisions. Let me introduce Ms. Eriko-san a bit. Eriko-san is now a principal inspector of PMDA, where she serves for the GCP inspections for medicinal products. She also is responsible for the international communications. In the past 5 years, Eriko-san is one of the key members for ICH E6R3 expert working group representing PMA and MHLW. Her educational background is biological science. So warmly welcome, and over to you, Eriko-san.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang, for a kind introduction. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am Eriko Yamazaki from PMDA, and as introduced, I'm a member of ICH E6R3 Expert Working Group. Today, I will talk about the overview of ICH E6R3 guideline revision, the guideline for good clinical practice. This is a disclaimer slide. Yes, since time is limited, my talk will be high level, but I would like to go over some background of the revision and cover some key changes. So ICH E6 guidelines is an important global standard for clinical trial conduct. It was first finalized in 1996, and 20 years later, in 2016, it was revised to version R2 and included integrated addendum to encourage more efficient approach to GCP and updated standards for electronic records as well. This included concepts such as quality management and risk-based monitoring. However, during this process of revision to R2, concerns were raised by an international consortium of health researchers. This included concerns that the guidelines still lacks flexibility as to risks with different types of trials, and that the focus should be more on issues critical to the quality of the trial. To address this concern, ICH published a reflection paper on GCP innovation in 2017 and proposed a stepwise approach to first modernize the ICH E8 guideline which describes the clinical trial design principles, and then revised the E6 guideline on conduct of trials. Next slide, please. This is the original letter submitted to ICH by the International Consortium. Next slide, please. The goal of GCP innovation is to provide updated guidance that is both appropriate and flexible enough to address the increasing diversity of trial designs and data sources. Next slide, please. Here, I would like to introduce key aspects of revision of E8 guideline, because E8 and E6 are sequential efforts of GCP innovation. The title of E8 guideline is General Considerations for Clinical Trial, and it has been already finalized. The revision has been already finalized by ICH in October 2021. The revised E8 guideline provides guidance on the clinical development lifecycle, considers quality of a clinical study as fitness for purpose, and introduces the concept of quality by design in clinical study. Quality by design is to provide prospective attention to the design of all components of the study protocol and procedures, and thereby aim to proactively ensure the quality of the trial. It is to focus on critical to quality factors and to manage risks for those critical to quality factors using risk proportionate approach. Next slide, please. Now I move on to the purpose of E6 revision. This slide is quoted from the reflection paper on the GCP innovation, and the purpose of E6 revision is stated as to address flexibility concerns with respect to a broader range of study types and data sources, while retaining the focus on current good clinical practice at sites. Next slide, please. This is the structure of the revised E6R3 guideline, presented in the original concept paper endorsed by ICH. E6R3 consists of principles Annex 1 and Annex 2, and principles and Annex 1 together will replace the current E6R2. Annex 2 addresses additional consideration on GCP on interventional trials. As written here, the scope of E6R3 guideline remains to be the conduct of interventional trials for both Annex 1 and Annex 2. It does not include conduct of observational studies in the scope. Next slide, please. This is an illustrative house diagram of E6R3. So the foundation is the principles of GCP, and Annex 1 and Annex 2 build on those principles. Next slide, please. E6R3 development process has some unique features. Firstly, the ICH Expert Working Group had a series of engagement meetings with academic representatives of ICH regions. This took place as part of stakeholder engagement framework endorsed by the ICH to ensure that their vision work would be responsive to the stakeholder needs. Secondly, to enhance transparency, the working group provided updates on the progress by publishing the draft revised principles and holding a public workshop in 2021. Also, extensive training materials are planned to be developed to supplement the guideline. Next slide, please. This is the current status of the revision work. Principles and Annex 1 has undergone public consultation last year and is now close to finalizing the document. Annex 2 reached step 2 of the ICH process this November, and the draft is now posted on ICH website for public consultation until next March. The working group has started working on the training materials. Next slide, please. So what is new about E6R3 structure and content? This slide and the next slide, I will briefly introduce some key changes in the revised E6R3 guideline. The E6 revision builds onto the quality by design concept of clinical trials introduced in the revision of E8, But at the same time, in this revision of E6, the whole guideline was reviewed and updates and rewrites were made throughout the guideline. Firstly, new structure provides clarity and better readability. Principle is the foundation of the guideline, and it is intended to remain relevant as technology, methods, and trial designs evolve. The guideline consists of annexes and appendices that goes with the annex. The revised guideline provides additional clarity on the scope language. And the revised guideline also incorporates language to facilitate innovations in clinical trial designs and use of technologies and operational approaches. For example, those for trials use dividing decentralized elements and those closely resembling routine clinical practice. The revised guideline sets a foundation for practical expectations around responsibilities of the investigator and the sponsor in the clinical trial ecosystem. This includes expectations in the use of digital technologies, including data handling and use of computerized systems. It also intends to clarify responsibilities of the investigator and the sponsors when several other parties, which the guideline now calls, uses the term service providers, are involved in trial activities. Next slide, please. And then most of all, the revised E6 guideline encourages the fit-for-purpose approach building onto the E8 guideline. The guideline enhances the risk-based proportionate approaches and brings the focus to the trial's critical to quality factors, whose integrity is fundamental to protect the safety of the participants and to ensure the reliability of trial results. Along with the E8 guideline, it encourages thoughtfulness in the design and conduct of the trial from the planning phase. Additionally, the revision incorporated learning from innovative clinical trial designs and lessons learned from public health emergencies. And also the revision encourages transparency by incorporating language on registration of the trial and results reporting. And the revision provides additional language to enhance the informed consent process, which took into consideration the various methodologies that may be used in informed consent processes. Next slide, please. This is the revised structure of E6R3 principles in Annex 1 based on the public consultation version. After introduction and principles, Annex 1 consists of 4 sections and has 3 appendices. Section 4, section on data governance, is a new section prepared in R3. And in the future, Annex 2 will be added to this structure. Next slide, please. This is the outline of principles section of E6R3 compared with the principles numbers in E6R2. So in R3, there are 11 individual principles. And to incorporate the key concepts just explained, Principle 7 on risk proportionality and Principle 10 on roles and responsibilities are newly introduced. The principles section have been expanded as a whole, and each principle has a heading and multiple subbullets that explains the concept. Next slide, please. Next is an overview of changes in principles in Annex 1. Sections with substantial changes are principles as well as investigator sponsors section and the new section on data governance and glossary. Also, appendix on essential records was changed substantially. In these sections, the language was updated or added throughout the sections while keeping the existing language that are still relevant. Just for an example, in the sponsor section, language on sponsor oversight and monitoring have been reviewed and expanded. Other sections have relatively less changes, but still incorporate some important updates. Please refer to the actual text of the final principles in Annex 1 that is expected to be released soon. Next slide, please. Next, I will now move on to talk a little about Annex 2. Annex 2 addresses the GCP considerations that arose from the increased use of a wider range of design elements and data sources. It builds on two key concepts of quality by design, fitness for purpose, and risk proportionality. The scope remains to be interventional clinical trials, and it should be read in conjunction with principles in Annex 1. The considerations provided in Annex 2 focus on examples of trials that incorporate decentralized elements, pragmatic elements, and real-world data sources. Next slide, please. This is the structure of draft Annex 2, currently published for public consultation. It mirrors the structure of Annex 1 and consists of introduction, IRB, IEC, investigator, and the sponsor section. For example, under the investigator and the sponsor section, there's subsections on investigation of products, and here additional considerations on the shipment of investigational product to the trial participants are provided. Also, in data consideration subsection in the sponsor section, key aspects to be considered in the use of real-world data and remote data collections are outlined. Overall, the draft Annex 2 places emphasis on practical considerations for the use of various design elements and data sources. Please see the actual draft Annex 2 text for details. Next slide, please. This is direction of training materials, which are starting to be developed. It is intended to provide clarity and supplementary information of application of E6R3. And the working group will work closely with the ICH Training Associate, the MRCT Center of Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard. It is planned to be practical and use case based, and it will be developed in parallel with the ongoing work on Annex 2. Next slide, please. So what is introduced by the E6R3 revision? The fundamentals of GCP remains unchanged. The basic principles of GCP is to ensure the safety of participants and the reliability of trial results. The updated guideline encourages fit-for-purpose approach and to take appropriate measures depending on the risks, the factors critical to quality of the trial. Instead of making a uniformed approach, thoughtful considerations on what is important and where the results should be allocated should be made. The overall, the appropriate and proportionate application of GCP will support flexible and various operational approaches to trial conduct, while safeguarding participants' right safety and well-being and helping to ensure the reliability of trial results. Next slide, please. This is the future plan. The principles in Annex 1 is expected to be finalized by the end of this month. Annex 2 is under ICH public consultation until March 2025. In each country, local public consultation period may be different, so please refer to your local information as necessary. And the training material will continue to be discussed in the next ICH meeting in May. Next slide, please. This brings to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Eriko-san, for your updates and sharing. I think that's very concise, but also very comprehensive. And I think that included all the important aspects, including the background, also the key timelines and the progress, as well as the training considerations. So thanks so much for that. And also, I think we are so exciting also to hear together that the final, technical paper of Principle and Annex 1 will be published very soon, hopefully within this month. And the public consultation for Annex 2 is now ongoing. So I think it's really exciting. So I think with that, all these, important context and background, we're going to move to our next session for the panel discussion. So I warmly welcome all the panelists, to the stage and have panel discussion together. So first of all, let me introduce all our panelists for today. The first panelist is Dr. Nihan Burul. She's now the Health Policies Director at Association of Research-Based Pharmaceutical Companies in Turkey. So warmly welcome. Dr. Nihan holds a master's and a PhD degrees in pharmacology. And also in her previous experience, she also worked in the Turkish Medicines and Medical Device Agency as the head of clinical trials. And in the past years, she has also been working as a key member of ICH E6R3 AWG working group. So warmly welcome. And our second panelist is Dr. Fu. So Dr. Fu is now working in Astellas, heading up the Department of Statistics and Programming in China. He has previously served as a TA and project leader at multinational companies such as Merck, AbbVie, and Sanofi, focusing on the innovative drug development. Dr. Fu has also published over 50 papers and book chapters in the past years. He has also been contributed as IFPMA lead expert in E6R3 Annex 2 group. So welcome, Dr. Fu. We have our also third panelist, Dr. Songmei Xie. She's now the Director of Office 2 of Chemical Drug Clinical Development, Center for Drug Evaluation, CDE, and MPA China. So warmly welcome. Dr. Xie holds her MD and PhD in clinical medicine. She's also a cardiologist. In the past years, she has been also working in the ICH E6R3 AWG as an MPA topic leader. So warmly welcome, Dr. Xie. And we have our panelist also from Japan, Dr. Kondo-san Hideyuki. He's now heading up the immuno-oncology in Novartis, Japan. Before Novartis, Dr. Kondo-san had worked in the MHLW Japan, covering different areas, including drugs, medicinal devices, regenerative medicine product. He also contributes to the international collaboration, including the EMA and also the Japan Pharmaceutical and Manufacturers Association, the GPMA, on GCP-related topics. His educational background actually included the pharmaceutical science, health sector management, and biomedicinal science. So warmly welcome all our panelists today. So I guess we all kind of hear and also revisit our achievement and also the progress of E6R3 so far. So my first question, I think, is to Songmei, Dr. Xie, Nihan, and Kondo-san. So with regard to your insight and also the general reflections about E6R3, and also because we are closing to the publishment of the technical paper very soon. So I would like also to ask you about your key considerations for the E6R3 implementation in your countries or regions. Thank you. May I first of all invite Dr. Xie? You put yourself on mute. Can you open your, we couldn't hear you. Can you open your?
Yeah, Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you, Sally, for your introduction and the question. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the organizer of the conference for inviting me to have the opportunity to communicate with all of you here. As for my view on E6R3, I would like to make 3 points. Firstly, I think as an ICH Type 1 guidance document, E6R3 is a key international standard for conducting trials involving human participants, including the ethical, scientific, and quality considerations. It is a basic guideline for all clinical trial stakeholders around the world, and it is of great significance to ensure the safety of participants and the reliability of trial results. Secondly, E6R3 promotes a patient-centric, scientifically rigorous, and risk-proportionate approach to clinical trials, reducing burdens while facilitating innovation and supporting global simultaneous development and harmonization. This necessitates a shift in mindset and an enhancement of capabilities among all relevant stakeholders. Thirdly, to ensure the successful implementation of E6R3, it is crucial for stakeholders to understand how the international standard interacts with local legal frameworks, given the global nature of clinical research. Comprehensive training programs are indispensable for all those involved in clinical trial conduct and oversight, as they must not only grasp the principles of E6R3, but also be well-versed in the specific local laws and regulations governing clinical trials in their respective regions. Moreover, gaining practical experience through real-world applications and fostering collaboration and communication among regulators, industry, and academia are essential for refining and adapting the guidance in accordance with evolving scenarios. These efforts will ultimately ensure the effective application of E6R3, promoting high-quality, ethical, and compliant clinical research that benefits patients worldwide. That's how I want to share this thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Xie. I heard you. I think you mentioned a very important point when we're talking about the international standard versus local legal framework. The kind of common challenges for the implementation of the new guidance. So thanks for that. And also, I think you mentioned a very meaningful point about collaboration really between among the stakeholders. Is also very key for the successful implementation. Thank you. Yeah. May I also invite Nihan for this question? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Sally. Eriko gave us a great overview on ICH E6R3. And I would like to say that, as Sally mentioned, I had the opportunity to gain both the authority and the industry experience. And I may say that with the experience I have gained from my both heads, the national regulatory authorities are the most important, but not the only actors in implementation. Without an effective engagement with stakeholders, successful implementation process will not be possible. And first of all, the authority should understand the guideline very well, should review and update existing legislation to align with ICH E6R3. This ensures the guidelines enforceability within the legal framework. And we all know that the implementation does not only mean the publication of the guideline by the authority. Perhaps the publication might be the simplest part of the implementation. For meaningful and successful implementation, engagement and communication with all stakeholders are utmost critical. And no matter how prepared the authority is, it's extremely important and necessary for the stakeholders to understand and internalize the guideline for a successful implementation. And the views and the suggestions of all stakeholders should be considered during the implementation period. The methods for implementing the guidelines should be continuously reviewed and improved based on the feedbacks obtained during the implementation process. It's very crucial, I think. And of course, as Eriko mentioned, the training and the awareness are crucial to ensure the proper understanding and implementation of ICH E6R3. The authorities should elaborate on training and organize systematic training programs for stakeholders. These trainings should provide information on the content, the importance and the implementation methods of the guideline, I think. And as Eriko mentioned again, currently the working group experts are working on the ICH E6RT training materials. And lastly, I think that the other important topic is monitoring. The regular monitoring mechanisms might be established to evaluate the effectiveness of the guideline implementation, and this allows for the identification of non-compliance and the implementation of corrective actions. So I think careful planning and execution of these steps will ensure the effective adoption of the national level. So thank you.
Thank you, Nihan. We heard you about the careful planning, which is also the spirit of quality by design, which is reflected in the principle. And also, I think you said the same point as Dr. Xie for the stakeholder engagement. That's very important. And training part to ensure the consistent and proper understanding, I think, is also the key. I still remember 2 years ago when we, in the ARC meeting 2 years ago for a survey, that I think from the feedback, also, I think the consistent understanding of ICH guidance is very, very important for the successful implementation. So thanks for that.
So, thank you.
Thank you. May I move to Dr. Calder-san?
Yeah, thank you very much. Kind introductions to me, Shari-san. And hello, everyone. My name is Kondo from JPMA, so Japan Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Association. So from my side, I'd like to quickly talk about the current state as well, how the JPMA, try to prepare for the implementation of the ICH GCP revision. Especially, I'd like to talk about from two aspects. One is regulatory change, and another one is about practical implementation. So firstly, about the regulatory change, of course, Eriko-san and the PMDA member and MHLW always working very hard to implement the ICH guideline, not only just for the ICH E6, but also all the ICH guidelines. And now today, Eriko-san explained, so ICH, this E6 may become the step 4 in this year, which means MHLW and PMDA will be very, working very hard to implement this guideline in a timely way. So definitely includes the industry side, but not only industry side, but also academia and all the stakeholders has to catch up with this situation. And also, as Eriko-san explained, so principle is the same. So which means maybe the current the minor revision of the current ICH guideline might be possible, but as other speakers explained today, we need to change. We need to and fully understand the basic principle of this ICH is E6R3 and apply to this one. And as you said, so we have the more flexibility for this guideline. So I believe that PMDA and MHLW think about how to implement reflect this information or this concept to the regulations. And so that's one point. And secondly, so practical aspect. So now the ICH E6R3 is kind of the dramatically changing. So principle is the same, but the how to implement is the dramatically changing. So maybe not only just the regulation, but all the stakeholders have to think about how to change ourselves, because everything is changing and it's kind of the brand new. So basically we need to think about how we ourselves also can change. So that's my point. So now as our JPMA members we have already started to communicate with not only just the regulators, but also the key site members. And also, of course, we go back to our companies and advocate that this changes. So like this, we need to, try to involving all the stakeholders for the discussion and think about how to change our behaviors. That's the current Japan situation. Yeah.
Thank you, Kodo-san. I think it's really valuable insight. And you said that how to really is change ourselves. Although we do understand and emphasize that the fundamentals of GCP hasn't been changed, but still dramatically change is a mindset, the fit for purpose approach, and how to be really flexible, etc. I think it's really helpful. That makes me think of one sentence, either we change or the world change us. So thanks for that. And also, I think you said about stakeholder. I think this is key points. You, Dr. Xie, and also Dr. Nihan all mentioned. I think it's very important right now. Yeah. And last question for the first part, I think is to Dr. Fu, because Dr. Fu has been working in the Annex 2 EWG, the expert working group. So I'm going to ask, one of the hot topics for Annex 2 is with regard to the real-world data or evidence. So we're wondering, so in your opinion, what are the key challenges in ensure the reliability and relevance of real-world data, when utilized in clinical trials?
Okay, so thanks so much, Sally, for this question. So I would like to share my thoughts in maybe 3 items. So the first one, actually, about the challenging part is data variability of RWD. So we know that RWD is sourced from various platforms, such as EHRs, claims data, and registries, which may lead to inconsistencies in various of things like data formatting and terminologies and data standards. This variability can complicate the data integration and also analysis. And actually, the second is about the quality and completeness. It is about the quality of RWD can be affected by many factors, actually. For example, missing data or lack of a standardized timing for data collection, and also incomplete patient records. All those issues can undermine the reliability of the data used in clinical trials. So the third one will be related to the relevance to clinical questions for fitness or purpose. This is the word also introduced by Eriko-san in the presentation. So that is one of the keywords of the current guidance that fit for purpose. So it's ensuring that the RWD contains the necessary key data elements. For example, the exposure or outcomes, which is relevant to the specific clinical trial question, which is considered crucial. So if the data lack of relevance, it may not adequately support the trial's objectives. So also, you may notice that ICH has an updated version of reflection paper on RWD, which is available in the ICH website. So it is encouraged you to read if anyone's interested in this topic. So this document emphasizes also the need for harmonization in using RWD to generate real-world evidence, which is RWE. So addressing these challenges to enhance the reliability and relevance of RWD in regulatory decision-making part. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Fu. I think, the keywords you mentioned and also the key challenges with regard to the real world data or evidence, first of all, is the data variability. So, and also you said that fit for purpose, I think is an important principle, for that part as well. So I think the development of Annex 2, as Erico mentioned, is also helpful for the ecosystem, to promote international and a certain standard with regard to the real world data in a very dynamic environment. So yeah, thank you for that. So that's general reflections. I think all of us heard the insight and feedback from our leading experts. And secondly, I would like to ask a few other aspect questions from different perspective. I wanted to maybe first of all also ask Dr. Xie. So because we know Dr. Xie is coming from the Health Authority and she's heading up the Office 2 of the CDE. So I really would like to, learn from her about the, risk proportionate. What does that mean, when R3 said advanced risk proportionate approach in the eyes of a reviewer? You need to open your mic. Yeah. Sweet.
Sorry, forget it. Yeah. Thank you, Sally, for your question. This is, I think, is a very good question, and it's not easy to answer. I think, yeah, I just try to make three considerations. I think, firstly, before talking about risk proportionality, I would like to mention the main objectives of the GCP. The primary goal of GCP is to obtain scientifically reliable clinical trial results that are ethical and protect the safety and rights of participants to answer scientific questions about whether the drug is safe and effective for use in the target population and whether the benefits outweigh the risks. Second, I think E6R3 proposes the fit for purpose and risk proportionality are essential for achieving the above purpose. From the perspective of the review, we are concerned about whether the applicant has conducted a good trial design for its research purpose when conducting clinical trials. Were the known and the potential risks to participants of the proposed study considered at the outside of the trial design, both in terms of the disease and the investigational drug, the timing, severity, and the outcome of the known risk. Where could the potential risk come from? At the same time, what are the risks that may affect the reliability of the test results? What is brought on by the drug itself? What is caused by an improper operation? Can and how can it be controlled? When risks are identified and determined, they should be considered and detailed in the design of the clinical trial protocol to ensure that the implementation is followed with sufficient scientific basis and consideration. Third, I think the introduction of new technologies, new methods, and new tools may greatly improve the participation, convenience, and efficacy of clinical trial. But at the same time, attention should be paid to the new risks faced by the introduction of these digital healthy technologies. How to identify, evaluate, and control relevant risks is also new challenge and opportunities, which need to be tried and optimized in practice together. Finally, I also want to share my thinking about risk proportionality provides a certain degree of flexibility, but this flexibility should be based on scientific consideration. It's very important, I think. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Xie. I think a few key words, as we all heard. I think the patient, centric consideration. I would say what you mentioned just now is one thing, and second, I think you really emphasize the protocol design, a good planning in protocol design to really have a thorough assessment of potential risk, and also to put the risk measures or controls, in the protocol. I think that's one important aspect. The other aspect I heard, I think you also talking about the new technology, like the digital solutions, etc. It's very modern and it has been evolving very fast. But at the same time, as you said, that the new risk emerging and how we're going to really mitigate these key risks. Innovations can bring the risk, but how to mitigate, we need to really be thoughtful on that. I think that part. The other thing, I think you said the flexibility. I really like that part. I think flexibility is not the purpose. The purpose is fit for purpose. So to that end, I think the question we need to answer from scientific perspective is something we need to keep in mind when we're thinking or implement the flexible approach in clinical trials. So thanks for that. Thank you. My next question actually is for Nihan. Nihan, I know you're also working in the Annex 2 group. So I really wanted to also ask you to share some update and all the insight with regard to this. So the Annex 2 has been prepared, for the first time. It's a pretty new annex or content for GCP. So can you share with us what were the primary needs that led to the development of Annex 2 and why have different design elements such as decentralized elements became important?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the great question, Sally. Eriko mentioned, touch upon very important points regarding Annex 2, and now I'd like to deep dive a little bit to the Annex 2. As you know, during the last decade since ICH E6 was first drafted, clinical trials have become more complex with respect to such as the clinical trial designs, use of the technology, and the quantity of the data collected. Clinical trials still continue to evolve with new designs and technological innovations. And in some cases, traditional methods are insufficient to address the challenges posed by the modern methodologies and the technologies. And unfortunately, we have experienced the COVID-19 pandemic in the very recent past, and we are still feeling its effects in our lives. Various measures were taken, precautions documents were published within the scope of the continuity of the clinical trials during the pandemic. And the aim was ensuring that the volunteers to participate in trials without affecting their health and well-being and the sustainability of the data quality obtained for sure. And the experiences from the pandemic provided additional lessons to consider for clinical trial conduct. So there's a need for methods that will facilitate participation and reduce the patient burden during that time. So on the other side, the richness of multiple data sources and the growing exploration and use of the artificial intelligence offers the potential to significantly enhance evidence generation in clinical trials. This is very important. And the rise of the digital health tools, technologies, remote monitoring, and the data capture required a framework to integrate these technologies effectively and very important ethically. So this is where the Annex 2 comes into our lives, comes into the play. Annex 2 addresses the GCP considerations on leveraging these advancements while maintaining data quality and integrity. It addresses GCP considerations that arise from the increased use of these wider range of design elements, digital health tools, and the data sources. And it provides additional DCP considerations focusing on examples of trials that incorporate DCT, decentralized elements, pragmatic elements, and as it was mentioned, in regards to the real world data. So Annex 2, it's very important. It should be noted that the Annex 2 is not meant to be the comprehensive of all design elements, since clinical trial ecosystem continues to evolve and the operational efforts and the data sources utilized will probably expand in the near future. So I would like to emphasize that Annex 2 should be read in conjunction with ICH E6R3 principles and Annex 1, which Eriko mentioned during her presentation. And regarding your question of why have different design elements become important, why the DCT elements become important, regarding this issue, I may say we see that there is an increasing tendency towards the use of the decentralized elements, especially starting from the pandemic period. Decentralized trials allow patients to participate from their homes or local healthcare facilities, reducing the geographical and logistical barriers. So this is very important. And this approach improves enrollment rates and the diversity in clinical trial populations. Besides these, decentralized elements align with patients' needs, offering convenience. It reduces travel time, hospital visits, and lower associated costs regarding these issues. So thereby improving the patient's engagement and retention, which is very important for the clinical trials. When we consider it from a completely different perspective, from an environmental perspective, we may say that the decentralized trials are beneficial to the sustainability. Let me say how. Simply by contributing to reducing the carbon footprint of clinical trials by reducing the travels, thus reducing the fuel consumption, I may say. In summary, Annex 2 is introduced to adapt the modern clinical trial landscape, incorporating decentralized and pragmatic elements and the real-world data, real-world evidence to meet the needs of patients, sponsors, and regulators while ensuring the quality, safety, and efficacy of the trial processes. As Eriko mentioned, Annex 2 is now open to public consultation. You may find it from the ICH website. And we welcome your comments on this draft Annex 2 guideline to highlight any considerations we have missed or clarify where the text is ambiguous. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nihan. I think that's very comprehensive. I'm still thinking of the our regulatory chair for E6R3 care, mentioned a kind of some general feedback for Annex 2 about the DCT and new technologies, from the caucus review. I think there's some feedback really said Annex 2 is kind of written in high level, so not very specific. So I think you said one thing. I think it's very important to read Annex 2 together with the principle and Annex 1, and really to ensure the fit for purpose approach. And the other thing, I think the key consideration for a kind of high level writing for Annex 2 is really to make sure that we keep the pace with new technology evolvement rather than, make everything kind of fixed. It's not good for innovation. So I think that part is important. And of course, as you said, I think pandemic, we learned a lot for those decentralized solutions, etc. And I think that has been very helpful, when we're developing those, digital and the DCT, elements. So thank you for that. I have the other question for Cotton-san. You have the background of an agency and also the JPMA and industry. So I would like to also ask a general question about, what do you think? So what impact the E6R3 do you expect on clinical trials in Asia?
Thank you very much. So nice question. And actually, in my personal view, now is a very exciting moment for everyone, including, of course, Asian people. So now the division of the ICH is E6 is coming for the first time over the 25 years, as Erickson explained. So, and actually that's a dramatic change. And the first ICH guideline comes from US, Europe, and Japan. And after that, that's implemented in the world. But now, a lot of the regulators and participants are joined to the ICH discussions. And now, dramatical change means everyone is the same start line of the change of our way to conduct the clinical trial. That's why everyone can become a pioneer of implementing this new ICH guideline. So that's a very exciting moment, I believe. And Asian people can provide the best practice for this implementation of the ICH guidelines. So I'm assuming that for everyone, that's a good opportunity. And also, as Dr. C said, so now international regulators are trying to collaborate with internationally. Also, not only just regulators, but for everyone can collaborate with internationally. And even though the Asian people are kind of very close to the communication and from the physical distance as well. So I believe more collaboration is accelerated among the Asia. And actually, for example, in terms of the centralized clinical trial, we might remove the border for the clinical trial, not just for the one country, but for example, one hospital at the one company can manage the other site in other countries like this. So it's maybe very far, but it might be possible. So I think like this, so more collaboration can be accelerated among the Asia. So as a summary, I'm very excited to implement this ICH guideline.
Thank you, Kondo-san. I like what you said. Everyone can be a pioneer because this really eventually impacts, everyone's work and life, because, we are all working, on the same goal, really to deliver the new drugs, to the patient. So I think it's really a good promoting. Thank you. I have the other question and really follow-up question for Dr. Fu with regard to the real-world data. You're talking about the data variability and challenges, etc. So I'm sure there could be many audience who might wanted to further understand, your considerations around, how to dealing with these challenges. So my question is really, the considerations should be taken into account when, the data variability means linking multiple data sources to improve the completeness and reliability of real-world data?
Sure. That is another great question, actually. So quite common, like in practice, that we run clinical trial if we included those consideration or components of RWD. So the first one I want to say is about the individual matching thing. So when the linking data from multiple sources, it is kind of vital to ensure reasonable matching of individuals to maintain the data integrity. This can involve using unique identifier and robust matching algorithms or control confounding factors, etc. So, and also the data privacy and security should be taken care of. That is the second thing I want to say. It's an adequate measure must be implemented to protect the patient's privacy and confidentiality when linking data. So this also includes employing de-identification methodologies and ensure compliance with data protection and regulations. So lastly, it's kind of a pre-specified linking in protocols. So the methodology for linking data sources should be pre-specified in the study protocol or related documents. This ensures transparency and agreement on the approach to data integration before the trial begins. So enhance the reliability of the resulting RWD. Actually, the ICH reflection paper I just mentioned in the first question also suggests that to have a common definition of RWD, and then best practice should get these considerations to improve the overall quality of RWD used in regulatory contexts. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fu. I do understand this is a big question, and if we have time, probably we can talk a lot, on that. But I just wanted to echo what you mentioned about one of the challenges when we linking the multiple data source, especially the cross-border, cross nation or country or region. We really need to keep in mind for the patient privacy and also confidentiality. I guess there could be, more challenges, maybe we can further discuss in other sessions with regard to the challenges also for the legal framework, cross-border data transfer, etc. So I think that's very important. And you're also talking about the good planning and the defined definition actually, included in the protocol for those multi data source. Yeah, thanks for that. I guess this is our first round question. I just wanted to have a kind of reminder to all our audience, if you have any question, please feel free to put in the chat. While we're waiting for the question from the audience, I think we do have some other questions prepared for our panelists. In the interest of time, I think probably we can cover 1 or 2 questions for all of us. Kondo-san, may I start with you for the challenges? So I have a question, because you're really working, have plenty of experience in Japan. So what do you see the challenges that you faced in current clinical trials environment in Japan?
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, so now I think clinical trials in Japan are a little bit more complicated compared to the previous one. So it's not just for the design, but just for the implementation aspect. So everyone try to keep the the quality of the studies. But now I think everyone a little bit more focus on the quality aspect, and everyone try to address, avoid any conflict or think about the good way or change the way. So that's the current situation, and the long-term experience of the way to work is kind of very familiar with everyone. So now it's difficult to sometimes change to the situation. Based on this situation, I think the clinical trial in Japan is a little bit inefficient. So that's why that's a good timing to think about change ourselves based on the this implementation of this R3. And actually, so I think Eriko-san, so PMDA and MHLW also thinking how to improve the efficiency of the clinical trials in Japan, not just for this ICH implementation, but hold the viewpoint of the clinical trial conduct and improve the environment in Japan. So that's the kind of the activities is actually happening. So I think Japan try to increase the attractiveness of the clinical trial conduct in Japan. So that's our situation, in my understanding.
Thanks for sharing. So if I hear you correctly, I think you said that, I know we also heard from you in the beginning that we know PMD and MHW put a lot of effort, for the renovation, not only for GCP part, but for other aspects, and really to make Japan more attractive for the new drug development, these trials, etc. Yeah, I also heard from Dr. Nakamura, one of the key stakeholders we engaged in EWG from Japan. About his consideration for the challenges in Japan is the risk proportionate, the implementation. So as you mentioned in the earlier time, that really I think people need some really practical guidance, and instruction to further implement and make the flexibility really fit for purpose. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that. I think in the interest of time, probably we don't have time to cover other questions, prepared by the full team and our panelists. But I guess in the future, we will have, other future more opportunities to discuss with stakeholders and, industry peers, academic investigators, etc. for these topics. So I really appreciate, all of your contributions, your insight, which is very, very informative. Thank you for that. Yeah. With that, I think our panelists also kindly prepared a takeaway slide, for all of our audience today. So the key takeaways and insights really we have been discussing and emphasized in this E6 session, including these 4 aspects. So first of all, is a consistent understanding of E6R3 is very important. So a unified understanding of revision is essential for implementing this Tier 1 guideline. And it is critical to understand the why behind the change as outlined in the ICH reflection paper and concept paper. So that reminds us if there is any revision or change if we don't quite understand. So we do encourage you to go to the ICH website to look at the reflection paper and concept paper, and also to join the training sessions or communication sessions in the industry platform or the communication with health authorities. And secondly, I think all the panelists and, Eriko as a speaker mentioned for a few times the key words of our 3 fit for purpose, risk proportionate approach with unchanged core principles. So people usually also ask me in the past years, it sounds like R3 has been dramatically changed, but how does that change look like? I think now I hope the answer is clear to you, our audience now, is the fundamentals hasn't been changed, but the mindset with regard to the fit for purpose, risk proportionate framework is really advanced and enhanced in the R3. So, and as we mentioned earlier, flexibility is not the ultimate goal. Fit for purpose is. So that's one part. The other part, I think our speaker and panelists would like to emphasize, and also they mentioned for multiple times in our discussion just now, is a stakeholder mindset and behavior shift. So engagement of stakeholders and collaboration among all the parties is so important to implement R3. And also, like Konto-san mentioned earlier, everyone is pioneer. Everyone can, really promoting this, and we need to change ourselves. This is really a shift in mindset, for the risk proportionate approach. Training, education, and proactive communication will really help our stakeholders for this change management process, worldwide. And also, last but not least, the real-world data or real-world evidence integration. So as Dr. Fu mentioned a few times, it is so crucial to ensure real-world data is fit for purpose by managing control, over data collection, security process agreement, ensure, accurate data linkage and prioritize the cyber security and the privacy and confidentiality protection, as we mentioned just now. So I think these are all the key takeaways and insights, we bring to you today. I know it's very informative and also will take time to digest, but I hope that this with IFPMA's, full support and really, to promote and to communicate all these key changes, considerations, and discussing about the challenges, I think is really, really valuable. And last but not least, I just wanted to say it's great to be here together discussing how these advancement can enhance the quality and efficiency of clinical research, and ultimately benefiting the patient in Asia and worldwide. So with that, I thank you, and over to the IFPMA Secretary for closing.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you to all the panelists for a great conversation around ICH today. So it's the close of another Asia Regulatory Conference, and we're glad that you were with us. Over the course of the last 4 days, we averaged more than 380 participants per day, covering a broad geographic area, not only looking at Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and others, but also participants from the UK, Europe, and Latin America. So great to see that there is so much interest in the Asia Regulatory Conference and everything that's happening and changing in our world. So during our time together, we've had the opportunity to cover many interesting topics, including a focus on the Access Consortium, WHO's work on facilitated product introduction, as well as hearing about Australia's regulatory strengthening program in the region. We also heard about experiences from both the Philippines and the Thailand FDAs, respectively, on their use and experience with reliance processes and programs, followed by TGA and PICS talking about GMP inspections. As we started to wrap up the week on day 3, we also looked at 2 hot topics featuring both e-labeling, universal labeling, and followed by examples from MHRA, NPRA, and TGA on how they are regulating drug-device combinations. And today, and thank you to everybody who participated, we looked at ICH, its objectives, use of eCTD in Asia, and implementation of E6. And let's not forget that while we've heard about many perspectives from national regulatory authorities, and we really do appreciate their engagement, we also had the industry perspective, their best practices, their learnings, their feedback. And it's really important that we have such a platform as this to help all stakeholders engage in discussion so we can meet the objectives that we need to in improving access for patients. So for the next iteration of the Asia Regulatory Conference, we will look to continue to bring to you exciting topics. If you have any ideas or thoughts, please do not hesitate to let us know. We've had a daily survey. We do appreciate the fact that you filled that out, and we do ask that you take some final last minutes to do that for us today as well. And lastly, but not least, on behalf of both IFPMA and Medicines Australia, we thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the day. Please don't forget to come to the website, arc.ifpma.org, and make sure that you look for the presentations and the recordings of the Asia Regulatory Conference. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.